Now more than ever, there's been a lot of conversation about, Overwatch reintroducing the idea of having team formats go back to 6v6 instead of 5v5. This has been a conversation that has been in the back of most Overwatch players' heads for a while, but finally it seems like the idea has reached the developers, and they'll be giving some sort of talk to focus on the idea of 5v5 and 6v6. What that conversation will be about, we're not really sure. But the fact that the developers are willing to talk about it has generated an increased buzz regarding, team formats in 5v5 and 6v6. A lot more than usual. This has been a long existing debate between Overwatch players, but now with the developers potentially getting involved, it's gotten a lot more prominent. And I wanted to throw my hat in the ring and sort of talk about this a little bit, but not from the perspective of, 6v6 is better for this reason or 5v5 is better for this reason. The one thing that I want to talk about is sort of the long-term effects of potentially switching from 5v5 to 6v6. As we know, Overwatch 1 was strictly 6v6, and for the most part that worked out great. I'd like to point out that there were issues with, the double shield and the extreme tankiness, and how something like the pirate ship comp, which had, Bastion sitting on point surrounded by Orissa's shield, Reinhardt's shield, Sigma shield, a whole flurry of shields, was a big problem. And obviously since tanks have been reworked, we won't be seeing that again anytime soon. But talking about issues with balancing and metas, I'd like to point out something that I feel like we are kind of ignoring. It's been about 2 years since Overwatch 2 came out, and in that time we've had about 46 patches release since, we converted from 6v6 to 5v5. And the reason that I bring it up as something to focus on is because while not all of those patches have had an influence on the tank role, a lot of them have affected, definitely affected DPS and support, and then in the later patches have sort of tried to fix the issue with tank not being very good. And I feel like if we revert back to the 6v6 format, you'll be kind of undoing a lot of the work that those previous patches put in. And, however you feel about the game in its current state now, I feel like we'll be undoing a lot of that work. Whether it's, supports being able to survive a little bit easier than they were in the current seasons, whether it was DPS finally having a tangible impact on supports and, being able to slow down tanks. We remember Orisa being super strong for seasons on end. I feel like, this is sort of a 3 steps back to take a 1 step forward kind of thing. We lose a lot of the development and balance that we previously had, and then, technically we take that step forward and the game reverting back to what it originally was, to that 6v6 format. So the question is, what cost, if any, does this change come to potentially? And I feel like it's a lot larger than people are making it out to be. I feel like we aren't fully thinking about more the long-term effects of what, going back to 6v6 means. Does that mean that the devs won't be able to, implement more patches and stuff and more balances to fix that? No, they've shown themselves to be, at the very worst, somewhat competent when it comes to, implementing patches and fixes and stuff to make the game more balanced. I'm just not sure if players are aware or understanding that implementing a change like this and introducing a second tank to each team comp will have, negative effects at some point. These tanks, as I've mentioned, and with the 46 patches that we've had since Overwatch 2, have obviously been balanced to fit into this solo tank format on a 5v5 team. Adding 2 of those to a team now in a 6v6 format, I just feel like there's a lot of unexplored consequences in terms of balancing and stuff like that. I know I haven't played a ton of, open queue, but the format has always been to have 2 tanks, at least for the teams I've played with, and solo queuing and queuing up with teams and stuff. It's always been 2 tanks because we know that 2 tanks, is better than 2 DPS in a role. So I don't know. I feel like as a community, we're so focused on going back to Overwatch 1 because we recognize that as being, game of the year. It was a, genre-defining games in terms of hero shooters. And while that's all well and good to say, I feel like, I don't want to be the person to say that, nostalgia is blinding us because, a lot of that factors about nostalgia have been, really leading the conversation as to why we shouldn't revert back to 6v6. But I feel like, the appeal of 6v6 on paper is doing a lot of the heavy work in terms of what the game will look like in the future, whether it'll be balanced especially. Because as no matter how you feel about Overwatch, it's taken a long time for Overwatch 2 to get to the state where it is now, where DPS and support, 2 of the roles, 2 of the 3, feel balanced and fun to play. And obviously you don't want to leave a role tank to struggle at all. That's not ideal and it's not the end goal. But, it's at the end of the day, it's like 6v6 may make the tank role fun again, but will it be overpowered? And how long will it take for the Overwatch team to collect data and make changes, etc., do whatever it takes to get the tank role to be balanced? And I know it's a crazy thing to say, talk about tanks as if, adding a second one will make the game unplayable, but I feel like it's something worth thinking about, and that may be a big reason as to why I would be less excited, I guess, to go to a 6v6 format straight up. Now, will the developers implement something like that where they just immediately add a second tank role when queuing and stuff? Who knows? The transition, if any, could be a lot more complicated, but I still feel like it's something worth talking about. You know, and it's tough to try and conceptualize this because so much of what I'm saying is speculative. You don't know if the team will actually, you know, transition to 6v6. We don't know if there will be any pre-transition balances to tanks made to try and mitigate how strong they will be when there's paired up again. But I feel like it's worth talking about. People want to treat 6v6 as if it's the, you know, all-encompassing answer to every issue that Overwatch has right now. And maybe in a way it will be, but I just feel like there are negatives to this, and talking about them is difficult but still important. I don't want Overwatch to, you know, take a major step back in terms of enjoyability and playability because the second tank is added and tanks become this super oppressive role, blah blah blah. You know, I'm rambling and all that, but TLDR, adding a second tank could have a lot of unintended consequences that could affect Overwatch in the long term. That's what I think. This is about short-term benefits versus long-term benefits. I think the short-term could feel good having a second tank. Long-term, who knows? That's what we'll find out if they do make the transition. That's all I have to say. In the future, you know, if you have any video ideas, please let me know. Thank you for watching, and I will hopefully see you guys again.